Well, welcome back to Legacy on Purpose. My name is Kyle Sanders. I'm the host of this podcast and the founder of Legacy Consultants Group in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I'm so thankful that you have taken time with us today. I can't wait to share with you who's on the podcast today. If you didn't pay attention, this just auto download and it just queued up for you automatically. You're in for a treat, my friends. You're in for a treat. Before we get rolling, I just want to say thank you again. This podcast continues to grow in downloads, and it continues to grow in comments and feedback we're getting. So I just want to say thank you for all that. If these shows have been meaningful for you, don't forget to share it with a friend, to rate us on Apple Music, tag us in social media. I run our social media content, so please feel comfortable. DM me. If something's been meaningful to you, I'd love to hear from you. It's very, very moving to know that our content is making a difference in the world. It's making a difference in your life. It's helping you understand your authenticity, your core values. It's helping you uncover the contribution you want to make in the world. When you hear these people who've done extraordinary things in the world that we all live in, that we share this community, this global community we all are blessed to be part of. And when you hear these stories and they connect with you, they help you through a difficult time. They help you understand how to navigate a challenging situation. They help you show up more as you, as the one and only unique you. It's extraordinarily meaningful to me to hear that this content is making a contribution in your life. So please keep sharing that with me. Keep sharing that feedback and share these episodes. Reach out to our guests. They'd love to hear from you. I know that. They're wonderful people. I get to connect with them before and after the episode. Many of them become friends of mine. What a gift that has been. And our next guest is no different. If you have not heard this, I can't even believe that. I can't believe he said yes. But if you have not heard of The Art of Charm, I'm telling you right now, I have a legitimate rock star I'm going to introduce you to. Co-founder, The Art of Charm, Johnny Dzubak. Truly, former rock star. Guy's incredible. And here's the beautiful thing, is that he took what I would say is incredible hard right in his life. I think so much of us have this misunderstanding of how we find freedom. And we redefine the word freedom in this episode in a way that all of us have the opportunity to have access to it. We talk through the gift of self-development, philosophy, art. I think one of the most incredible pieces of this conversation is a new understanding of where motivation comes from. If any of you are out there thinking, I just can't figure out how to get motivated, I can't figure out how to get things going in my life, he gives a new and very fresh spin on what creates motivation in our life. And I really must admit to you, he won me over to his perspective. I was a little hesitant at first, and then we dialogued on it, as you'll hear. And I have to tell you, it's one of the most fascinating perspectives I've heard in a while. So you have to decide who's got better hair if you go to our Instagram account, which one of us has got better hair. I got to tilt my head to Johnny. If I didn't have this headset on, it might look a little bit different. You could tell he comes from a family of hairdressers. But truly an incredible honor to have had the conversation and the connection with the one and the only Johnny Dzubak. So without any further ado, I present to you this incredible conversation. Well, Johnny, thank you so much for setting your time aside to have this conversation. And I have to express this gratitude. My show, Legacy on Purpose, certainly has a lot to give credit to you. One of the pioneers in podcasting. Your show is incredible, so popular, so well downloaded. And I know podcasting has certainly been tremendously impacted by your show, The Art of the Charm. And so thank you so much for investing your time in this conversation. But most importantly, thank you so much for the incredible content you create and the difference you're making in the world. I hope you truly feel proud of what you're doing. And I can't wait to have this conversation with you. So thank you for being here with us.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. And I am proud of all the work we did, and it's one of the reasons I got involved in self-development. And for myself, and a lot of people see self-development as a way for people who are broken to get better, and I don't see it that way. And I think that is a myth that needs to be dispelled. I see self-development as a way to enhance your life in all aspects. And the tools that we use in self-development, say maybe CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, or acceptance commitment therapy, Are those used to help people who feel broken? Well, sure. But there's psychological tools that give you help with your own cognitive processes, worldviews, the filter in which you view the world, so that you are able to navigate it at a high level. If you don't have those skills, if you don't pick them up naturally or go out of your way to learn them, you are doomed to navigate the world with the simple skills that you have. And granted, ignorance is bliss. So if you don't know what's out there, well, how do you know how much your life can be enhanced? And for myself, self development is a journey, much in the same manner that philosophy is. And for myself, my interests lie in the intersection of self development, psychology, and philosophy. And
Mm.
you and I discussing today will be playing in that very sandbox.
Oh, and you know what's interesting you say that is that I think one of the correlations I use, and I'm so glad you're wearing corrective lenses. I'm assuming those aren't just a fashion statement, but is that in life we've accepted society that some of us are born with perfect eyesight and some of us are not, and that there's a standard of eyesight called 20/20, or we can be better, we can be worse, but there's some place we all say in society that you should not operate a motor vehicle without something to help you see better. But for many people, we have this journey in life that has given us this lens of perspective that's extraordinarily distorted because of some moment and some moments or some experiences in our journey that give us an unhealthy perspective of the life we're living. Like for you as an artist and a creator, when did you recognize the ability that you can change this perspective in your life, and as a result of changing it, make a profound difference in the way you lead and show up in other people's lives? Where did that moment come up for you?
Uh, Great question. And I love discussing this because also it shows that you're able to do the things that you want to do and you can make changes, and that you can choose different paths and you're not subjected to your past. Now, for me, I grew up in an artistic household. One that we were discussing earlier, my mom was a hairdresser. My dad was a factory guy, but he played in bands. They rehearsed at the house. They were played out every weekend. My dad was quite busy with that. So as a young man, it was very easy to get excited about the musical instruments in the house and the music that was playing. And so I followed that path. So at a very early age, I was already obsessed with rock and roll, metal, punk, just music in general. And that's all I cared about. So I wanted to, and then of course, while that's happening, I'm 47. Let's just get that on.
That's
I'll just go
okay.
ahead and expose that.
We you usually still can be cool at 47. I'm 42,
Thank you.
but I'm telling myself I can be cool. So if you're cool at 47, that means I'm good at 42.
Oh, well, we got it. So for myself, not only was music happening at a level in my house where there was bands rehearsing and the radio was always on. Also, I got MTV hit my little suburb outside of 30 minutes outside of Pittsburgh. And MTV, when you are a teenager, when it just shows up on your box, changes your whole world because you're now exposed to stuff that wasn't on the top 40 radio. I'm being exposed to Los Angeles and the hair metal bands and New York City and things that I would not have been exposed to otherwise. And so that, of course, MTV in its early days had a large impact on my life as well. So there was just music all around me. When I was 21, I moved to North Carolina, a town called Chapel Hill, UNC basketball, Tar Heels. And in the 90s, the Southeast college radio music scene was a big deal. So the hair metal bands had already passed, grunge had already passed, and now it was REM and the Black Crows and Driving and Crying and Let's Active and Superchunk. And it was like, so it was all these college circuit Southeast bands. And I moved down there on a whim. to be involved in where things were happening. And I started working in bars, and through all of my 20s, I spent most of my time on the road as much as possible. And when I wasn't on the road, I was managing a club as a talent buyer and bartender, booking bands. My life was just overly consumed with music. I was doing the thing that I set out to do, and I was really enjoying myself. However, getting into my later 20s, staring at my 30s, the music industry that I had grown up wanting to be a part and dedicated my life to, you could make the argument that it didn't exist anymore. We are now moving into this new world of technology that we get to live in today, but it was in its very infancy. There was no streaming services. There wasn't even social media as we knew it. Friendster just ended. MySpace was kind of blowing up, and we were downloading music from LimeWire. That was what was going on. But as I'm seeing this technology come in, I'm seeing its early effect on my daily life. And as I looked forward, I could see that what I had dedicated my life to did not exist. And I had to ask myself the question, well, if the industry that I dedicated my life to doesn't exist and the remnants are rapidly changing so fast that I can't predict what it's going to be or look like at that time. No one could have predicted what it was going to look like. I don't even think the people whose hands were on the technology knew what they were creating, and we're dealing with the fallout of that right now. But for myself, it's like, do you want to continue this? And the other thing is the music that I was into. Like, we got Animal back here.
Yes.
We got Iggy Pop over there. We got a Marshall amp. Like rock and roll. Like, I could see that was not a very lucrative or popular form even during that time. And the idea, is it going to come back? Is it just going to be a circle? And for myself, it's like, you know what? I have never sat down to figure out what it is in my life that I want, because I had been engaged with music at such an early level. There was never any reflection or work on myself. And so I decided that, staring into my 30s, that I was going to start asking myself some hard questions. And with hard questions, you have to be honest and give yourself hard answers. I've never had to do that before my path was chosen. So that was when I got into self-development as an opportunity to learn and discover about myself, to make sure that as I move forward, that I was being honest with myself of who I was going to be and what I was going to dedicate my life to.
I love that. And what I really appreciate about a couple of things in there is, one is your willingness to recognize that the path that you had chosen wasn't going to be available to you, or the way you envisioned it, or what was happening. The willingness to go, like, hey, like, this sounded awesome. This is not, for reasons beyond your control, your intention, your vision, and when your horse dies, get off of it. And you were willing to get off that horse and move forth. I've got to ask you a question though. And I think we got a safe word. I think it's animal. So if one's a little intense, but what is the difficult question that you've asked yourself that you have not found the answer to yet?
At 47, there are questions that we ask ourselves that there are no answers for, where the answer is, you go on a journey, and the answer changes depending on where you are in that journey. Now, for all of us, when we get into philosophy, is where you start asking yourself hard questions, and hopefully you will get, if you're honest with yourself, those hard answers. But the minute you turn to philosophy to start asking some questions is the minute you go on that journey. And as your experiences change, the knowledge that you gain changes, the knowledge of yourself you gain as you change, as you get older, the answer to those philosophical questions change. And I can tell you how I view the world at 26 when my hero's Keith Richards and I wanted to be Keith Richards. How I navigated the world then is quite different than how I navigated at 47 because of the philosophical journey that I have been on. And the issue with that is you can only ask people about their philosophical journey because everything is so different with them as a person. Their journey is going to be different. And even if we have ended up in the same place now, if I discuss my philosophical ideas now, and let's say that you and I have landed in the same place, we both had taken different roads to get here.
Yes.
And though some of the questions that led us here were the same, so how we arrived are completely different.
I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things that's interesting in this conversation for me so far is it's the understanding that in that journey, I suspect there's some things that you used to hold true that you no longer do any longer. And the things that you thought were not true, you hold even deeper to be true to yourself. Like for me, this journey looks like a letting go and a holding on to in a continual process of holding and releasing and holding and releasing of truths until we find ourselves in a place so often for me where I hold very little to be rigidly true anymore in my life and stay at a place of constant openness and curiosity. And through that place of being curious, truly authentically curious, I find my speed of learning to be so much faster than it ever has been before. Like, is that part of what your process has been through thinking and believing and almost anchoring? And I don't want to put these words in your mouth, so guide me if I'm not correct here, but almost anchoring your identity to being a rock star, seeing yourself as a rock star, that this is, dreaming and envisioning and investing all this time and energy and effort to be a rock star. You still look like a rock star. I could hire all the hairdressers in the world. I still wouldn't look as fashionable. But my point, the people are like, what's going on with Kyle? But my point is this, is that through this journey for you, has it been a process of letting go of some of these things you held to be true and learning to re-anchor to other truths, holding on to less truths, being less rigid and more open during the journey?
Well, I agree with you. In order to move forward, you're going to have to let go of the past. You cannot chain yourself to some of these ideas and continue to evolve. But at the same time, as being able to let go of certain ideas from the past, you have to be also anxious and excited to embrace the new learnings and what's ahead of you. And the difficult thing there, once again, this is a determinant of your worldview and the world and how strongly you adhere to that. When we're living in a place where we can be honest, the media isn't being honest with us. They've been busted red-handed. Every media company that we had grown up trusting has blatantly gaslit and lied to us. And I'm supposed to embrace these new ideas that are contradictory to what the media might be telling me. So who's right and who's wrong? And how do I hold dear to the things that mean the most to me when I'm being gaslit to tell me that those things don't mean what I thought they meant? And so this is why when you pick out a worldview and you do the work to be philosophically sound, you set up barriers and boundaries to hold your ideas in place to not let corrupted forces destroy those. So you have to also, though, open yourself up to these new ideas and let go of some things. You also have to protect the things that mean the most to you, which could also harm you as well. So it's a picking and choosing of what is right, but also being honest to go, well, this doesn't feel right, but I know it's the right answer. For instance, an example of this would be all the work that we do to rise above our animal tendencies. But then we're told, well, don't do that. You're here now. Party it up. You know, you're never going to be able to eat chocolate cake your whole entire life. So you might as well eat as much as possible right now. Like, I've been eating my whole entire life, but I didn't learn how to eat until I was in my 30s. When I actually learned what an appropriate amount of calories look like, I couldn't believe it. I grew up in a family that if you didn't eat everything that we've failed, if we go out to a buffet, if you haven't eaten 3 times as much as we paid for this whole trip was an utter failure.
If you're not breaking the place's if the guy's not putting a out of business sign when
They're
you
not
leave,
escorting you out the door.
so I was a wrestler growing up, and we'd hit the old country buffet, those kind of places when we've been starving, and
Oh,
like
yeah.
we'd roll in, the whole team, and I swear to goodness, there's some old country buffets and Golden Corrals in Ohio that probably went out of business when we left because we were teenage boys. We hadn't eaten for days. We just got done wrestling all weekend for a tournament. Just we back up the truck in the food consumption department, and I'm an endurance athlete. I do ultra marathons and ultra endurance events, and I know it's kind of crazy. And I think one of the things that you just touched on is the power of discipline, and the recognition. And you touched on it lightly. I want to because I'm curious. Like that's not common in the music world. Discipline is not like when we think of musicians and we think of discipline. Like these are not other than you have to be incredibly disciplined to be exceptional at your particular instrument, right? To get to the place where somebody would pay money to hear you perform your art, right? But outside of that truth of discipline, they're not thought hand in hand. When did you begin to see the value and the impact of discipline? When did you learn that understanding in this journey we referenced earlier?
I love this question. Everyone wants to know, where was the change, right? How did this happen? How did you go from somebody who was trying to emulate Keith Richards and Johnny Thunders and Iggy Pop to somebody who is speaking about discipline and philosophy and psychology? The hard questions that I needed to ask myself is, what is healthy living? How do you go through life in a way that maximizes your efforts? How do you go through life when you are responsible for your own well being and your happiness level? When you start asking those questions and you start looking for answers, you realize that a lot of the things that you have been doing are so wrong and have been so detrimental to your own happiness and well-being that you're like, well, maybe perhaps I give it a change. So for myself, I was like, I will give this a try. Why? Because I never lived like this before, and let's see what the outcome is. So while I was going through the entry phase of self-development and philosophy and psychology, I was still bartending, and I would break a piece off of self-development, and then I would go into work with an exercise
I love the story.
an experiment that I would run for about a week or two of my shift to see what the results were. And I would measure the results in the money that I was making tip wise.
I love this.
When I learned that my happiness was my responsibility, that blew my mind, right? I never thought about that before. And
The inside job, right?
right. And that you could just be happy. You don't need anything to make you happy. I didn't know that. So the new mission, right? The new experiment was, okay, now I'm going to go to work tonight and I'm going to be happy.
Oh, you made a ton of money, didn't you? That got validated fast, didn't it?
I was like, whoa. And so what am I going to do to show this happiness, right? I'm going to smile. I'm going to chat up everybody. So that was one experiment that I ran. And I saw that not only did I make more money, I enjoyed my evening at work that much more, right? It was like, whoa.
Like double validation.
Exactly. Another experiment would be tonight I'm going to trait compliment everybody who comes to the bar. This is something different than a superficial compliment. So if I'm just complimenting on people like, oh, nice shirt, or I like your hair, or whatever, it's like, okay, how does that change if I give somebody a trait compliment? Like, rather than I like your shirt to I like your sense of style. And
Mm.
rather than you have a great laugh, I love your sense of humor. So now there's more validity to the compliment. There's some more weight to it because it is something that took more time to pull from seeing this person. And of course, my tips on the nights that I did trait compliments were much higher than nights when I was just being complimenting people superficially. And so I had the opportunity to run all these experiments because the world of self development was brand new to me. I was so excited. Every time I added a new little piece to my life or a new little habit that I read that would change my framing of the day or how I saw the world or how I felt, I just decided to run it. And I said, if I feel better, then I will make sure that that new habit is now habitual and I'll tie some ritual around it. And then I would look for the next little piece. And so it was just this never ending of wow. And the minute I implemented a couple pieces in my life and my well-being and my happiness changed exponentially, it was over. It was like, well, now I want all of it. And so self-development was, well, check out all these psychological tools that you can use to enhance your life. Look at all these philosophical ideas and leanings that you can use to enhance your life. And now we're talking about a filter in which we view the world that is part self-development, part psychology, part philosophy. And that filter enhances all of your experiences. So of course, each day is that much better because of the tools that you use to extract meaning from each day.
Yeah, and people pay a lot of money for drugs that'll do that for them, right? I mean, people pay a lot of money for that kind of drug, right? I mean, let's be honest. Like, if you had that, like, you would. I mean, you would be the most popular guy at the bar. You would be.
I would just say because I had spent a lot of my 20s wanting to be Keith Richards and Johnny Thunders and Iggy Pop, I had already went down that road and realized there's got to be a better way,
It's
right?
empty, isn't it?
I'm,
It's
I'm,
super empty. Yeah,
yeah,
no, I wasn't. I wasn't making. You said that just for the record. You made that. You can make that confession. I didn't draw that out of you, but no, it's true though. Like we chase this feeling, this ideal of what happiness comes from, and we look for it in so many different no win situations where
yes.
it's a pill, whether that's pharmaceutically prescribed or more organically created, if you will. But one of the gifts I think you shared here, and I want to take a moment to really recognize, is that we as people right now in the society are giving up agency more than ever of our own happiness. We're giving it up. We're saying that I will be happy when fill in the blank, right? And the truth is that as you recognized, as you shared so beautifully, is that happiness it's now. And unhappiness can be now. And it happens at the speed of thought. It happens at the speed of thought. And I think what's so beautiful and what you recognized is, and I really want to recognize you for this. So many people set a dream, whether that's to be a professional athlete, whether that's to marry somebody that looks a certain way, or they're going to achieve something professionally at a certain level, or they're going to be a rock star in your instance. And for whatever reason, it just doesn't play out. And true happiness never comes to them because they're always talking. Do you ever watch Married with Children?
Grew up on it.
Yeah, right. So they live life like Al Bundy, right? The touchdown and the moment, and they're living in this glory that never happened or could have happened or should have happened, right?
4 touchdowns in one game.
4 touchdowns in one game, right? So is the true what I think so incredible about your story is the true gift that you had to give this world lied in a journey that you never expected to happen for you.
That is certainly true. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I never set out to do this, but um, I've I've been lucky that I followed my happiness and my curiosities into this world. And to be authentic is to follow those curiosities and to see where they lead. Also, with curiosity, you have to also give respect and acknowledgement and add curiosity to when you are emotionally stirred up to find out why. And you owe it to yourself to explore why you're fired up. And this is something else that is very bizarre to me because as I grew up, I followed those things that stirred me emotionally. I didn't react to them as those are bad. I didn't react to them as those are not good or I don't like them, therefore no one should hear them. I responded to any sort of emotional stirring as why do I feel this way? What is behind this?
That's
And
fascinating.
perhaps it's a bit of the artist in me where what's the old saying? Art is for making the uncomfortable comfortable and
Mm,
uncomfortable and the comfortable uncomfortable. And I love that saying.
I've never heard that. That is profound.
Oh, I love it. And so anytime where I have an emotional reaction to something, whether it's bad, whether it's good, I investigate it. I want to know more. And that leads to some crazy rabbit holing through the technology that we have, but it gives you the opportunity to be a better person for learning about these things, even if it made you feel bad. Not everything that makes you feel bad is bad, and it
Mhm.
needs to be investigated. Perhaps there's an opportunity for you to grow in this moment where this thing had such an effect on you.
And maybe that feeling is connected to a misunderstanding and an opportunity for a perspective shift. I know that for me, and I don't know if this aligns with your journey, but I know for me, so much of the last decade has been taking out and examining just almost like this puzzle that has been put together. And I'm going, well, how did this come together this way? And taking each piece out and looking at it and saying, well, I mean, I see this picture that is my life that has come together from all these pieces, but I don't remember picking this one out of the box. How does this look anymore? And there's been some pieces that I've very intentionally examined for some time. And sometimes this is a very short process, and sometimes this is a more in depth process. But I look at that piece, and on occasion, I just set it over here without judgment, but I just casually set it down over here and then say, that's not for me anymore. And I find a new piece and I put it in the picture, and things become much more beautiful through that selection and experience.
I love that.
And I think one of the things that's so powerful is we begin to understand that that is a choice we have. And that one of the things I thought was really powerful that you just said is that these emotions that you have, so often we stand in judgment of them,
Mhm.
right? And we say that I shouldn't feel this way, or I should feel that way, or I can't believe I'm feeling this right now. And the truth is, you're feeling all those things for a reason. And if you can stand in non-judgment of yourself, right, which you have done, and just get extraordinarily curious with why you feel that way, it's the birthplace of understanding where it comes from and the opportunity to decide whether that's serving you any longer anymore.
Yeah, I mean, this goes with it's part stoicism, it's part acceptance commitment therapy, where you're able to defuse thoughts from emotions, and it's a practice of being able to do that. So we're able to examine why we feel the way we feel. We're able to examine the thoughts separately from the emotions to see what is there, or do I have a reason to feel this way? And if I don't like the way I feel, and because of this trigger, well, then let's examine why that is. And as you mentioned, that's where the biggest lessons in life are. That's where the biggest surprises and I think the most missed opportunities, because we scared ourselves with how, because of our emotional reaction was so strong, it's a scary thing to investigate. But if you don't investigate it, how could you understand something that has so much power over you?
So is there something in your life where something used to have power over you, and as you investigated it, you came to a position, and I'm not, if this is too vulnerable of a question, certainly feel comfortable not answering it, but as you've gone on this journey yourself, where there's something you went, it grabbed a hold of you emotionally, used to, and as you investigated to its root, you went, that's not going to be part of my. And then as a result of it, the next time that experience, that next time that trigger, if you will, you chose a different path. Can you share a story, an example of that in your own life, how that understanding served you, Johnny?
Yeah, I think I ended up in this position and getting into this line of work from the emotional response that I've had to certain ideas, especially learning that how I had been living was not in a productive or meaningful manner. One that was put me in a position where I was trying to extract value out of the world and
Mm,
view the world as a consumer rather than adding value to the world and seeing the world as a producer. And that shift changes everything because now I'm not waking up every day wondering how I'm going to feel good and what am I going to do to feel better and make everything okay. Now it's I waking up and what do I get to do today? Who do I get to speak to? What's in front of me? What am I learning today that's going to allow me to do what I'm already doing at a higher level? That's a shift. I will also say now at 47, when it comes to music and art and beauty, I look at it from a much different place. I also see beauty as a forgotten force that we had given up on or don't take seriously anymore. So, for instance, when people ask me um, how to get motivated, motivation, aspiration, inspiration, you will never run out of motivation if you understand beauty. Beauty is a motivator. It puts us in a place of being stirred up emotionally, wanting to aspire to that beauty, want to also create to that beauty, wanting to hold that beauty. There is all the motivation in the world in beauty. So when I hear people that say, I don't have enough motivation or I lack motivation, you don't lack motivation, you lack beauty. Beauty will do the work to motivate you, to give you something to aspire to. Have you also noticed that there is a lot of people out there when they see beauty, their natural instinct is to destroy it? Why is that? I'll tell you why. Because the emotional response that they had to that was so overwhelming, they had to destroy it.
because they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know how to.
Exactly.
This is a very interesting. So, because I am somebody who, so motivation to me is garbage. It's just garbage. Like how to get motivated. I literally don't know and understand what you're talking about. Like, because motivation is, it's the fastest hit in the world. It goes away like that, right? It's got a pretty short shelf life. What happens to me is that for others is anchoring your decision to do something for the love of something or someone. Like if you anchor it, is that when this outcome unfolds, I'm going to feel love. I'm going to share love. I'm going to experience love. I'm going to create love for somebody else. That if we anchor to love, fear is a terrible motivator because the minute fear's gone, it's out. It's out. It's over. Like, somebody has that heart attack and they're like, I'm going to lose 50 pounds. And like, they lose 30, they give up halfway through, they start pounding the Doritos again. And I'm not trying to, diminish the fear of, health risk for people, but it's just fear is not a long shelf life. So beauty is an interesting one because I never have thought about motivation through the filter of beauty. Talk to me more about that because that's an
Yes.
interesting idea.
Well, think about every vacation you ever have taken. And certainly if you go to Europe and you look at the architecture that past civilizations, past societies had put together. And what was common there? It was beauty over utility. Why? Because they needed to create meaning to stir emotion, to anchor your motivations through, to anchor how you maneuver in the world and what you contribute to that society. If that's not anchored to anything, why would anyone contribute? What is the purpose of getting along with your neighbor? For instance, here's something I just loved. So in Budapest, there is a statue on top of the hill of Budapest, and it's like a bishop or a priest, and he's just holding a cross over the whole city. And I looked to see when that was put up, and I can't remember now, but it's been there for decades, centuries, and you're going to see that statue. Think about what that statue says to the people in that town, but also think about what that statue says to somebody who's visiting that town. And so you see that and you're inspired to act a certain way. And if you ever get lost, that's your guide to this is how you're going to maneuver in this society. And if you're a traveler and you've come to this city and you look up and see that, well, now you have your instructions on how you should behave. Now, they got to make that statue awe-inspiring to stir those emotions so that perhaps you feel some divinity in being in front of that inspires you to act in a certain manner. Think about the churches that you see in Europe. And you go to a church in, say, Spain, and you find out that it took several hundred years to build this church. So you telling me the guy that decided to build this ain't even going to see it when it's done? And the reason it took so long is because they needed these stones to be dragged several hundred miles away from another country. Well, what's the purpose of that? Well, because the purpose had nothing to do with utility. The purpose was about beauty, because beauty is a motivator.
That's incredible. That's an impactful piece of information you just shared. Because I don't think this. I agree with you. I think beauty has really been set aside.
Yes, it
in
has.
this country, big time. I live in a home that was built in 1912. Okay, so it has all these elements of architecture that aren't done anymore.
Nope.
Not at all. And I live in an area where
it's not cost effective.
Oh no, dental molding? Are you kidding? And so I got to tell this story. So there was a 40-foot cherry tree on my property that was dying, and I looked at this thing and I said, I can't. This cannot become mulch. So I spent an enormous amount of time, and I found an artist who was building furniture out of dying trees, walnuts, ash, what have you. I hired somebody to come in and cut this tree down in one big, just 40 feet of, right, lowered it down. It's unbelievable to watch. I was home when this happened. They brought in a sawmill, a mobile sawmill, and milled built boards at my property. They take it away. A year later, it's finally air dried enough to go into a kiln. Okay. And then 6 months later, I get the table. It is 10 feet long, 10 or 12 feet long. It's 2-inch thick solid cherry. There's not one piece of that table other than some screws and some bolts that came from anything other than a tree that used to be on my property. It is beautiful. It weighs an enormous amount, but it is absolutely gorgeous. Had the guy lay on his back and sign the underneath of this thing. I don't know where he's gonna go, but I wanted to remember who was part of that journey. The guy's name's Brian Parsnell. Incredible. But I looked at this tree that God had created, that the universe had created, and went, this needs to have a second life. There's beauty in this that can't go anywhere. So I never thought about it through that filter of how this motivation of creating beauty, right? This motivation to see beauty in this, motivating me to wait. I mean, my goodness, I could have had 10 tables delivered from our house in that period of time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective.
Well, it also goes with, you're able to build ritual and tradition around that as well because it has so much meaning. It just allows things to stick. And when we look at the modern world, we see things being, well, what's cost effective? What's the utility? Is it practical, right? Practical, cost effective, and utility. Does that sound sexy? Does that sound like anything you want to visit? You
No,
want to see?
no.
Does that sound like a motivator? That no. That just says, yeah, it'll get the job done. I don't care about that. And then and I hate how cliche this might seem, but I would think if we filled the world back up with beauty rather than utility, I think we would be able to talk to each other in a more meaningful, understanding, and respectful manner because people will understand that these things mean more to us than being cost effective or it serves a purpose. If people understood the meaning behind things, maybe perhaps there would be a little bit more respect for it. Because, for instance, if I give up the things in my life that have meaning for utility, then I'm going to expect you to.
Yes.
And I would also say that in our culture, and you've mentioned it and I've mentioned it, we've set beauty aside for practicality and utility. And then we expect everyone else to give it up. That's rude of us. It's rude and it's disrespectful.
Well, you know, as you expanded upon this point, I think one of the things that also worries me as you share this and is we're dialoguing on this is that okay, so if all things are nothing but utility and efficiency, well then and all those things come from us as people, then how are we evaluating human life? Are we evaluating your life and my life based upon a machine and nothing but a capitalistic, like the worst of capitalistic perspective?
Do
Like,
you see the slippery slope we're standing on now?
yeah, so as you started to dialogue in this, I'm like, holy cow, I never really considered this at the way you're presenting it. Like that is because now do you believe that's the first step in dehumanization is the loss of beauty?
Yes, I do. And you would think, by the way, I talk about this, that my apartment here in Las Vegas would have tapestries and statues, and there's Michelangelo's David in the corner. No, I live a very modest, minimalist apartment. However, my medium of choice for beauty is music, um, and poetry and lyrics. But I also love. Here's my favorite thing to do when I go on vacation. I want to put myself in front of beauty and I let the emotions well up in me. And then I take out my phone and I have a pages thing running where I put thoughts down when I'm standing in front of things that are awe inspiring and to compute what is going on. And because what is happening is it's a shaking of the box, right? It's
Mm,
stirring all the emotions, it's getting things flying around. This is where you're going to be at your most creative. This is where you're going to see things through a different lens. You're going to be looking at things from an angle, from an emotional standpoint that you wouldn't have seen if you weren't stirred up. And so when everyone's like, okay, well, I love this idea of beauty. How do I get back to it? How do I bring it into my life? Well, go out and put yourself in front of it and allow yourself and do yourself the favor of writing out your thoughts. So you have to commit to those words and those emotions and those feelings so that you can examine them from an objective standpoint. And what does that mean to you?
I love this. I love this. And I run a ton, as I think I mentioned earlier, and it's all, you know, outside. There's nothing more painful than running on a treadmill.
Oh, it's the worst.
And it's the worst. And one of the things that I find beauty in is just in creation in the world we live in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I'm blessed to there's a canal that runs through my city and it has a wonderful tow path I can run upon. And there's nature preserves that are along it that wealthy citizens have donated land along this thing to allow there to be some nature and not just urban sprawl around it. And so there's a particular spot that has this little pond, this little lake, it's called, but I would call it more of a pond, but it has just a tremendous amount of animal life and fauna and flora available almost all year round to enjoy upon. And so here I am in the city, in Indianapolis, and early in the morning and late in the evening when I'm doing my runs, I'll take this detour around this pond, around this dirt path, and it almost as though it transports me someplace else that isn't where I am, but it's still my feet are still where I'm planted, but my soul is moved to a different locale just by what's around me. What I hear you saying is to put ourselves in that sort of state, whether that's music, whether that's nature, whether that's literature, wherever I find myself in that state in nature very easily, is to put ourselves in that state of connection to beauty as much and as often as we can.
100%. When you do that, it allows for you to begin to start appreciating that beauty in other things, other mediums that maybe you're not all that familiar with. And when I was younger, in my 20s, there'd always be a girl like, oh, you got to come see my photo exhibit. Of course, as a young man, it's like, I don't care about the photos, but I'm going to come to your photo exhibit.
Yeah.
And you're standing there like, yeah, oh yeah. Like inside, I'm like, I don't get it, but yeah, it's a great photo. But as I've gotten older and learned to appreciate art, and I think it is something that with age and experience and philosophical meaning, that you start to see the beauty in things a little bit more clearly than when you're young and you're narcissistic and self-centered. And when you allow yourself to feel that way in front of great beauty, well, then it's easier for you to see it in other places. And then you have more respect and reverence for more things. And I think that's very important. There's a book by Ray Oldenburg called The Great Good Place. And Ray Oldenburg lays out a discussion for why in modern civil engineering and building towns and little city centers and things, they took out things such as the cafe and the corner bar and the library because they're not cost effective. That space could be better off putting some retail in that has $1,000 purses. Like, those centers are where we look at our community to see what we can fix. We're connecting with other people. And I also see socialization and social skills as an art form. There's, it's funny, the engineer guys always want a formula for great social skills. And you have to shake them out of that perspective, out of that lens, because it is not a computer program. Social skills are an art form. And so it takes a different lens, a different view to get good at that, because it's self-expression. Communication is everything going on here. My clothes communicate something. My glasses, we were joking about my hair.
We were joking about hair earlier.
This is all self-expression. Now,
yes.
and that's an art form. There's no formula equation to this. It's an art, right? And back again, it's like, well, can you appreciate that as aesthetic? Maybe not. Maybe you can. You certainly did when I popped on. You're like, whoa, check out this guy, right? Like there's something to that, and it says something. And we all are saying something about ourselves at all times. Don't you want it to speak to what you're passionate about, what you're excited about, the beauty that you are able to put together for yourself, to put it out there? I mean, if we expect it to see it in other places, well, then it becomes, well, what is the beauty that I'm going to be adding? And that beauty may be in how I interact with other people and the presentation that I'm going to put on. You know, beauty breeds beauty.
Yeah, and I've spent the last couple months, and really candidly, like brought the whole family into this. But since August of last year, my wife and I meditate each and every evening on gratitude. Strictly on gratitude is the focus, right?
Mhm.
And I think gratitude is one of the ways you can see beauty easier in the world. It's a
Great.
tool that unlocks the ability to see beauty.
Yes.
And we've spent the last almost 2 months each and every evening as a family. I've got 3 kids, and we each evening as we sit around the dinner table, we talk about what we've been grateful for that unfolded that day. We all share our little piece of gratitude as a family. And I think one of the things that I'm taking away from this conversation, one of the gifts you've given me, is that to add to that, not just gratitude, but where did we see beauty in ourselves? And I think that that's one of the things that, as I hear this, is that I think so often, and for both genders, men and women alike, while it's more common to refer to a woman as beautiful, is what do we see inside of ourselves today? Where do we bring beauty into the world? And where we see beauty in ourselves today? Do you ask yourself those questions, Johnny? Is that something you kind of download or, you know, think about as your day ends or as your day begins?
Well, a gratitude practice is certainly important. I try to do that in the mornings. I will go out to my patio and with my coffee, and it's about focusing on 10 breaths. And while I'm focusing on those 10 breaths, trying to find 3 things that I'm appreciative of, that I'm grateful for, to refocus my mind on the things that I have rather than the things that I don't have, and to center myself for the rest of the day. um, our wake up routine is probably one of the most important. So they used to say it was the most important meal of the day and want you to eat all this insane food. No, but it is certainly the most important part of the day of how you will go into the rest of your day. Those first moments and those first habits count about what you're focused on, how you're going to show up, your excitement level. It's all right there. And of course, if that becomes the most important part of the day and it's going to dictate the rest of your day, well, then you want to prepare for that very well, which means I want to make sure that I get a solid evening of sleep and I'm well rested so I can put together the right habits and routines in the morning to give me the ability to get the most out of the day.
So true. And I think so often we discredit that. Like, how did you start the day? Well, I reached for my phone, and I read my email. Barf, barf, right? Now, I had an extraordinary start to my day today. I played hide and seek, or as my 2-year-old calls it, seek, to begin my day underneath our covers. And as she's giggling her head off, as my wife is supposed to not be able to find her. And then my 8 and 6-year-old joined us in this incredibly difficult game of hide and seek.
That's
But
lovely.
it was an incredible, incredible start to my day. It really was. And, I don't know if that's something I can make a routine, but when I'm training for an ultra endurance event, there's a very habitual process
Oh,
that
I bet.
every bit of it, what I eat the night before, how much rest I get, what time I get up, where my clothes are set out, what I'm going to be listening to, what I put inside my mind, what I put inside, like it's very like all of these things. You have to be extraordinarily disciplined throughout the process, or you're never going to get there. And what I think that is so cool about what you're talking about is that whether it's finding beauty, whether it's finding gratitude, whether it's changing our perspectives and the way we see things, this whole dialogue you and I have had, the honor of exchanging here today, is that there's an intentionality behind it, that we have to be intentional with creating what we create, that all the beauty in this world doesn't just fall out of the sky. That gratitude isn't just something we drive through the Starbucks and grab. I'll take a venti gratitude. It doesn't show up just without effort. That there's an effort in this process of creating the world and the life that we want to live in.
Absolutely. It's the difference between living life reactively or proactively. So if you live it with the intention of setting it up to be uh, a wonderful life, one that you extract beauty and excitement and throwing in and contributing value to the world, then you're going to have to live in a proactive manner. You're going to have to set out to do that. That does take with waking up with the right habits and putting forth the work to train yourself to get the most out of the day rather than waking up and taking the day as it comes. I certainly done enough of that in my 20s. And it's funny, my dad, I mentioned earlier, he worked at a factory and he was pissed off most of the time. Factory life will do that to you. I could, still remember the wincing of him, like having to go to work, And when I grew up seeing that, the idea of waking up early in the morning or having to go to work, to me, looked like a slave life. And so I went into my 20s thinking the idea of making it means I don't have to answer to anybody and I'll do things when I want to do them, if I want to do them. And I'll wake up when I wake up and I'll go to bed when I go to bed and no one tells me what to do. That's how I'll know I've made it. Only to get into my late 20s, angry, pissed off, unable to really make headway in my life, to be constantly frustrated, only to learn the complete opposite of discipline and structure and meaning and responsibility. All the things that I, for some reason, got in my mind would make me a slave were the very things that I needed in order to free myself.
If you knew how many times I've said that the fastest pathway to freedom is discipline,
I know.
And here it's funny you say that. Our early 20s journey, like my wife will ask me, what were you like in your early 20s? I'm like, not marriageable. I was not marriage material.
No.
I was not. Like, I am glad you did not know me then. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm going to share one story and then we're going to call this quits. What do you think? She goes, okay, what's the story? And I share the story and she goes, okay, got it. I literally, during a college football game, I can't believe I'm going to tell the story, but you're just somebody I think is going to appreciate it. We're pretend that nobody else is listening. So during a college football game during my alma mater, I convinced the mascot to give me the top part of the mascot. Now, it was a mascot uniform designed for somebody 6'2", not 5'6". So this thing did not fit well. And my football team for the college I went to was not good. Like, we were literally on David Letterman show for being so awful because it's his alma mater, Ball State University. And so, like, we went like seasons and seasons without winning, right? So we're winning a game. And I take this mascot, put it on myself, and attempt to run onto the field during a live football game. I'm gonna cheer on so I try to run onto the field while the game's going on with the Ball State mascot. True story. And I get tackled by a second string or third string football player. I get just absolutely leveled. So I share that story with my wife, and she looks at me and she goes, "That's all the stories I need to know. Thank you very much." Of how I was in my 20s. I mean, I was not contributing. I mean, it was entertaining. For those who saw it, it was extraordinarily entertaining. I was lucky not to get arrested. But my point in that story is that like what I thought was freedom was not. It was the opposite, right? And what I understand as freedom today is the willingness to see that certain behaviors and choices will never set us free. And the willingness to hold ourselves accountable to certain choices that truly bring freedom. And it's incredible to hear you dialogue on this. This has been a fun conversation.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You can share that story in the future if you liked it. I've got way more than that, but we'll keep it reasonable for recording purposes. That's for sure.
You know how I came to terms with my 20s insanity? So only realize that you don't get old and wise without being young and crazy. And so I could go, oh, well, I put in the young and crazy to an extreme level. So now I'll reap the rewards.
I like it. I'm like, I wouldn't be this wise if I wasn't that stupid. Listen, I promised you could have read a book. I just lived it. And it was, I think one of the things is that we're so afraid of making mistakes in this world. And we're so afraid to step forth and to really have that embarrassing moment, to have that getting tackled on the football moment, to have whatever your stories are, they're irrelevant for this point, is that there's a gift in them. There's a gift in all of them.
Yes. So imagine young kids today who need to let go of the past and embrace their future and become the person that they were always meant to be. And you know, as well as I do, at some point, you're going to have to come to terms with the past and let go of certain ideas that keep you there and embrace new ideas that'll take you into the future. How are you supposed to do that when all the mistakes you've ever made are now you're going to carry them around with you in your pocket? Because people, young kids, they're putting a lot out there online. We all are. Look what we're doing right now. Could you imagine if you had this during your 20s and you're putting it?
No, no.
So, what
Off,
about for young kids who are putting everything out there on TikTok and Facebook and whatever Instagram, whatever else they're doing? And then there's a, don't you think? I would think that that would have an impact on their evolution, on their growth, because they can never escape the mistakes that they have made
yeah,
or escape their past. And we see it all the time. We see what they're calling cancel culture for somebody who put out a tweet that people don't agree with 10 years ago. Well, what we thought of as humor 10 years ago was completely different than where we're at today. There's a lot of things that have changed. So how are we supposed to navigate that moving forward?
so that's an interesting question that you pose. And I think one of the key ingredients to that is to have a culture that remembers the power and the beauty of forgiveness. That to remember that we all have made mistakes and that all of us are not the worst decision we've ever made and none of us are the best decision we've made, that we're somewhere in the middle between those two events, and that one of the greatest gifts we can give somebody in this world is to authentically understand that in that moment, in that situation, they likely were making the best decision they thought was true for them.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a real opportunity. Like I was asked recently on an interview, what worries me the most about the world? And it worries me not that we're holding people accountable for the bad decisions they make today, is that we aren't allowing people to evolve and to become a new place, a new state, a new way of being. That worries me. We all make mistakes. It's the permission we must give people to grow from them. So you ask an extraordinary question, and I hope that our culture learns from it, is that I have said things that I am not proud of, and I have done things that the current version of Kyle looks back at the old version of Kyle and goes, what in the heck were you thinking? I think you pose an incredible question. And I think as parents, as a parent, as my children age, I have a responsibility to protect them from that tendency as much as I can, to distract them from that need and to help them anchor their identity in something other than how many views they get on a TikTok video. You know, the good news is I can't dance and my kids can't dance. So TikTok's probably not going to be their platform. I mean, holy goodness. You know, I think we're okay there. So, but beyond that truth. So it's a great question. And I think it's one we need to keep asking.
Well, I saw something on Instagram the other day that made me think twice what the kids are dealing with, and they just can't go out and have fun anymore. Somebody's got to be there. Somebody's got to film it. So skateboarding was part of my youth. It went with the punk rock. It was
It's
skateboarding and
very,
punk,
it's all in.
and it was the '90s.
I was a blader, not a skater, by the way. I was a
So
blader. You were a skater.
yeah, and it's the '90s. It was the birth of extreme sports. It was a big deal, and so it's, even to this day, I love to see what the kids are doing. And on Instagram, and there was a post from a popular skater who says, "It's about, remember, guys, it's about skating. It's not about followers." And I couldn't even imagine the idea of going out with my friends to just enjoy a skating sesh. And now we got to be filming our parts and editing this video and making sure that we get in. It's like, I think, I hate to say it, but I would feel that that would take away from some of the magic. But we'll see. I feel, how can children just go out and play without those thoughts of, it takes you out of the moment.
I couldn't agree more. There's this pressure to document every moment of your kids' lives, right? And I'll say to my wife, I'm like, put the phone, and like, I'm like, we're not doing it. We're not videoing it. I don't care if the grandparents are upset with us, like whatever, right? Like it happened just because you and I were there, and that's all we need, right? I mean, it's, and I'm so thankful I have the enormous amount of archives of photographs of my young kids, right? Because there's moments of nostalgia and things, and we'll look at it and wasn't that vacation amazing, or wasn't those first steps great? But in general, I think it was my daughter was playing softball for the first time, and I did one video of her batting, and then I text my wife and I said, she wasn't there. I said, that's it. I'm putting the phone down. You've seen one. I'm sorry. I'm just want to be present in the moment.
Yeah. Why should you be watching your daughter playing ball through a phone?
Yeah, it sucks. It's not the right way to do it. So, well, Johnny, I want to just thank you again. This has been a really wonderful, wonderful opportunity to spend time with you. I want to thank you. So often in life, when somebody has gone through the transformation that you have, they don't ask that next question, which is, how can I use this to serve others? And this world is a little bit better place because your willingness to be open, to share the beauty in your growth, in your journey, in some of these incredible pieces of wisdom that you've shared with our audience today. So, I just want to thank you for everything you're creating, the content you're creating, and your wisdom and your willingness to put it out in the world and allow it to stand on its own. So, thank you again for your time and everything you're doing. If our audience wants to find you, how can they find you? How can they support you? Where can we find you on social media? Share with us how those who are interested can support you in the work that you're creating.
So I handle all the social media for the Art of Charm. So if you follow us on Instagram, you follow us on YouTube, you follow us on Twitter, that's me you're dealing with. And I have a lot of fun with having those platforms to put our messages out and talk about making mistakes and fumbling around. I'm a bit of a boomer when it comes to technology. So you might see a video on Instagram that's half cut off or that's probably me. But we put everything up. YouTube is going to be probably, we're changing the way we do things up. YouTube is probably the easiest way to find new Art of Charm content. Though we put stuff up every week, and we're going to be doing it close to daily. But at the Art of Charm, everywhere you find awesome, fun stuff, we'll probably be there as well. So
wonderful. We'll be linking all of that in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for your time. Truly a gift to spend this hour or so with you.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor and a pleasure.
So I don't know about you, but the idea, the beauty is the foundational connection of us as people. The beauty is the origin of motivation. That because we've stripped, and I agree with him, that we've stripped beauty so much from the society we live in, and we've moved to this utilitarian approach of construction and building and all these aspects, it dehumanizes our connection with one another. That if we can't see the beauty in everything, we can't see the beauty in anything. And if we don't create beauty in the world we live in, we can't see the beauty in the people we live with, is what I pulled from that connection. And that was a game changer. So thank you so much for being with us today. I hope that resonated with you as deeply as it did with me. I'm going to meditate on that. And I thank you so much. Reach out to Johnny. I know he'd love to hear from you. If that resonated with you, tag him on Instagram, DM him, thank him for that wisdom that was meaningful information to me, and just a very perspective shifting moment for me to hear that from him. So Johnny, thank you again for that. I thank each and every one of you for spending time with us. Until next week, until our next connection, go out and live your legacy on purpose.